Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Krochmalnek. Together, we'll explore the art of turning tiny seeds into a thriving microgreens empire, sharing insights, coveted secrets, and strategic wisdom from building one of Canada's largest microgreens farms. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations with leading figures in the world of microgreens. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. On today's episode, we're going to do a full cost breakdown of growing microgreens. This was a highly requested topic, and for the early listeners of this episode, you'll get access to this comprehensive tool for free. You can download the cost calculators on our website at microgreensconsulting.com. A lot of growers struggle with having accurate numbers for their business. These cost calculators are tools you can use for many years to come. It's easy to use. You just got to fill in the numbers that apply to your farm or business. This episode is really best suited to either watch on YouTube or download the calculators and follow along with the audio. I'm really excited to walk through this amazing tool with you guys. So let's get right into it. So the first question you might have is, why do I need this tool? So if you're growing microgreens as a business, knowing your numbers is crucial. I've seen it over the years in consulting that some farms are growing crops that either have negative or really low margins when you account for all the costs. And the key is to account for all the cost of production. Having this information allows you to see if it's worth it to grow a crop, how much you're making per tray for the different crops you grow, and to see if there are ways to either lower the cost or raise the prices to make it profitable. If either of those options doesn't work, then it might be time to cut down on the number of crops you grow in your business. This also allows you to double down on the crops that are more profitable because now you'll have the data to make more informed decisions for your business. So let's get right into the cost calculators. All right, so there's going to be two versions of these calculators, one in metric and one in empirical for those in the US, but pretty much most of the world uses metric, but I know a lot of our listeners are from the US. So we have both versions. Use whichever one is easier for you guys, but they pretty much end up with the same numbers. You're just using liters or grams versus gallons or ounces, depending on what you're more comfortable using. So there's going to be 5 tabs in this calculator. And what I'd recommend is having one for each crop. So we'll go through first pea shoots, and then we can go through broccoli so you can get an idea of the difference between different crops, what numbers you need to adjust for those different crops, and then to analyze the numbers, which is the most important part of having these kind of calculators, because what you guys want is the numbers, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So first off, there's a few assumptions that are made here that are important in this calculator. First one is the Gaia Green fertilizer you're using is 35 grams per gallon. Again, you can definitely change this if you're using another fertilizer or if you choose to not use any fertilizer at all. This is totally customizable, so you can take out or add things in as you see fit. I just made it as standardized as possible for what most people are using, the Super Soil recipe, which is going to give you the best results and the highest return on your time and investment. Next, each tray is going to have 4 liters of soil in it. And the green cells that you see in all these different tabs here, so all these green cells are the numbers that you can change based on the products and prices in your local area. So first off, we have a soil cost calculator, which will help you determine how much it actually costs in soil per tray. Next, we have a seed and electricity cost calculator per tray. So this will tell you how much you're going to pay for seed for different varieties for each tray and how much the electricity costs to run in your local area for each tray. Next, this is a really big one, which we're going to get into that I think most people don't account for, and it's really important to account for labor in your production because it is a big cost of production in microgreens farming. So we'll break this down, but this is the labor cost calculator. Next, this one's super simple. This is the label and clamshell cost calculator for those of you that are selling. I guess if you're selling to retail or restaurants, you're going to have these costs. So this is definitely a simple calculator, but an important number to keep track of. And the last one is the total production cost per tray and clamshell sold. So this gives you the cost of production per tray, what the revenue figure is. So this is the only really sell here besides the yield and packaging size that you would change. And then all these numbers are automatically calculated. So as you can see, pea shoots just off the bat, very high net profit margin. very high net profit per tray. And when you plug in your own crops and your own numbers, you'll see that this will change drastically from crop to crop, which is why I decided to make this, because not all microgreens are equal. Not all of them are as profitable. Some of them are super profitable, like pea shoots, and then others really are maybe not best suited to grow at a small scale because of the lower margins. But let's start from the beginning with the soil cost calculator. So again, if you're using Gaia Green or another fertilizer, you can put that in here. So again, the green is what you're going to change. So for the Pro Mix, what I recommend is either HP or MP, and that's going to be in the 3.8 cubic foot compressed bale. So when you uncompress that bale, you're going to get 53 gallons or 200 liters of uncompressed soil. So a lot of people think that you're getting 113 liters or whatever it is in the bag that it says on there, but when you uncompress, and it ends up pretty much being 200 liters. That's what I've determined over the many years of using these compressed bales. So then the cost per bale. So this is going to also depend on your local area, and that's going to give you the cost per liter in this case, or cost per gallon if you're using the empirical document. And then this is the an important one, is how much fertilizer and soil you're using in your tray, which these are based on these assumptions. So you're using 35 grams per gallon. So 4 liters is just a little bit more than a gallon. So that's 37 grams of fertilizer and 4 liters of soil. So this gives you a total cost of $1.10 for the soil in this scenario. So if you're using a uncompressed bale of soil, you can just literally switch out, or if you're using whatever soil you're using, whatever fertilizer you're using, you just switch these out, change the costs, and then put the numbers in, and all the cost, the total numbers, the total cost per tray will be determined for you. So one thing that's really great about this document is that you can use this to keep track of changes in costs over time as well. So you can, like, let's say, date this one as January 1st, 2024, as an example. So this is where your costs are as of January 1st, 2024. And then maybe in June, you can do it again and see, oh, like my costs have gone up. How does that affect my margins? Do I need to raise my price? Are my margins still within what I am comfortable selling? So you can kind of use this as a tracking tool over time as well, and see what the differences are over time. And this will help you make informed decisions on adjusting your pricing, which is another thing I see a lot of farms struggle with, is feeling comfortable adjusting their pricing. And if you have cost increases that are justifying an increase in price, then every other grower is going to have the same challenge. So I think it's important just to keep track of that, to make sure you're keeping your numbers in check. You're making sure that your farm is as profitable as it can be, and to make sure that it's within the range that you're comfortable with for the different crops you're growing and for your total profitability of your farm. Next, I put this in here. This is an optional item, which is a vermiculite top coat per tray. So again, you would put in the bag size for the vermiculite, whether it's in liters or gallons, the cost per bag, and then that gives you a unit cost per liter or per gallon, how much you're going to put on each tray, which here it's half a liter. So that costs 18 cents. So this gives us a total soil cost of $1.28 per tray. And actually, I need to change this to tray right here because that's not right. So that's how much it costs for soil per tray. I think that's a pretty reasonable number. A lot of to be honest, these are retail prices, so you should be able to get better pricing if you're buying either by the skid or you're buying fertilizer from a distributor. So you should be able to get much better pricing than this. But this just gives you a rough ballpark of what you can expect. Next, we're going to move on to the seed and electricity cost calculator. So the seed one, pretty simple. In this case, we're growing pea shoots, and we're going to use speckled pea seed. So if it comes in a 11.36 kilogram, which is 25-pound bag, and let's say it costs $52, it's going to cost you pretty much half a cent per gram. And depending on how much you put per tray of dry seed, so in this case, we're going to recommend 350 grams, that's going to automatically calculate for you the $1.60 of seed cost per tray. And again, all the green is what you can change out. So depending on the cost, the unit size that you're going to purchase in. And if you want to do things in pounds and ounces, that sort of thing, just use the empirical seed or empirical cost calculator document. Next, this one is one that I think I've seen a lot of people think electricity to grow microgreens is a lot more expensive than it actually is. And I think it's really important for people to see the reality of what this is. And by having this cost calculator built into this document, you can get a sense of, okay, if I need to grow a crop that takes 4 weeks to grow and the lights are on for 26 days, let's say, how much is that actually going to cost me? So you can literally just change this to 26 days. That's per day. So lights on for 26 days. It's going to cost you, if you want to grow a tray for 26 days with the lights on, using 3 grow lights that are 42 watts each for 18 hours per day, assuming your electricity cost is 15 cents per kilowatt hour, which is, if that's more expensive than it is where I am, but depending on where you are in the world and in your country, this price will vary a lot. That'll cost you $2.21 per tray. Whereas pea shoots are only 7 days, so it costs just 60 cents per tray. So all you got to put in is how many light hours you use per day, which I definitely always recommend 18, how many days the lights are on. So in this example, pea shoots is a 10-day crop with a 7-day light cycle. Then how much your electricity costs per kilowatt hour. You can usually find this easily on the website of your utility provider. The number of lights you're using. So some people use 2, some people use 1. Definitely recommend 3, but you can change this out if you're using less. And then the wattage of your fixtures. And then that will give you the total electricity cost per tray. And this is great because you can what I would recommend doing is with this document, just have one document per crop. And then you can just adjust. Pretty much the only thing you're really going to need to adjust, most likely, is this tab, the seed and electricity cost, because the soil should really be the same for all the crops. Labor, clamshell, those ones should be the same. But if you want to get really in the nitty gritty, you can change them depending on if there is differences. For example, you might have a different size clamshell for speckled pea than you do for something like broccoli, as an example. So you can always change that on this. But the next one is the biggest one, which is the labor cost per tray. So this is, as I mentioned, not that many people are calculating this or checking what their labor costs actually are. And this is so important because, as you can see, if you look here, it's $1.28 for soil, about $2.20 for seed and electricity, and then labor, $2.83. And it might be more, it might be less, depending on what you guys calculate for how long it takes you to do different tasks. So with this is really where there's the only kind of work that you guys have to do to get this calculator to be accurate, which is to figure out how long it takes to do these tasks, which is soil mixing and flat filling, seeding, watering, harvesting and packaging, cleaning and disinfecting, delivering. And you can add more tabs here. You can add like just maintenance or other labor costs, that like management costs, depending on what you're doing and things like that, or repair costs if that's something that's commonly done at your farm. So just something to keep in mind here. But this calculator is really for a variable cost, so you don't want to include like installing your lights for the first time, because that's a one-time cost, not a recurring cost. So this is for things that are directly related to the growing and selling of the microgreens. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Now, I think the best way to do this would be there's 2 ways to do it. One is you just have a total number of hours it takes for everything you do at the farm, and then you don't have to do necessarily this breakdown. You can just have, I pay a fair wage in my area is, let's say, $20 an hour, and I'm working 50 hours a week, and I have a staff that's working 30 hours a week. So then you have 80 hours times $20 divided by the number of trays you grew that week will give you pretty much this number, which is the total labor cost per tray. But I generally recommend to have a more detailed analysis of what it costs to grow the tray in terms of labor, because this will help you determine how you can save costs. So as an example, a lot of people spend a lot of time harvesting and packaging because they're cutting by hand. So if you have this document, you can see it cost $1 per tray to harvest and pack. If you can get this down to, let's say, one minute, or let's say 1.5 minutes, you're saving right there off your total cost per tray 50 cents. So having this information helps you determine where the efficiency needs to come from to get your farm to be more profitable and to be an efficient, lean farming machine. So as an example, seeding might be 1 minute, but let's say with the little green seeding machine that we're going to be selling in the spring, you can get it down to, let's say, 0.3 minutes as an example. So you're going to save about 20 cents per tray in labor as an example. And sometimes it could be more, it could be less, depending on what you're doing. So that could add up pretty fast if you're growing hundreds of trays. So just as an example, these numbers may seem really small individually, but they add up to a lot. Labor cost in all farms, whether it's microgreens or outdoor farming, is usually the biggest cost. So that's why it's really important to automate the different tasks here. And more importantly, before you do that, figure out how much it's actually costing you for these different tasks. So all this is changeable. So you can figure out, let's say, for example, soil mixing and flat filling. So let's say it takes you to break up your bale, add in your guy green, and fill the flats. It takes you 60 minutes to do 60 trays, as an example. Then you'd say, okay, it takes 60 divided by 60 is 1. It takes 1 minute per tray. So that's how you would get these numbers. So it's really important to keep track of this labor data. And it's always helpful to add a little bit. If let's say you're the one who's doing all these tasks, it's really, really helpful to add in a buffer, because usually, like, your employees will probably not do it as fast as you can. Of course, if you have machinery, it gets closer. But if you're like seeding by hand or watering by hand or harvesting by hand, generally staff will be slower than you have, because one, you probably have more experience doing it, and two, you're motivated to get it done as fast as possible. Whereas, the truth is, employees have sometimes have a motivation to maybe do things slower, because if they're getting paid by the hour potentially. So I always add like a 10-20% buffer to what it takes you to do it. So if you're calculating how long it takes you to do these tasks, add in 10 or 20%. And if you're calculating how your staff are doing it, which is the better way to do it, then you can just use the exact numbers that it's actually taking. So this is really, really important. Feel free to add in any other sections that you need. So you can just add in a tab here if you need. So just add a row in below, and then just add more information. The more detailed this is, the better. I just wanted to keep it relatively simple and focus on the most important and time-consuming tasks. But if there is any more, feel free to add them in. The next tab is the label and clamshell cost calculator. So first, we'll talk about labels. So if you are buying labels that are pre-printed, then this right now will work great. You just put in how many labels come in a case, what the case price is, does the simple division, gives you cost per let's just say label there, cost per label. And if you're doing it on like those paper printable ones, you would just add a new line here that is the cost of the ink. So it'd just be how many pages does your cartridge have? So let's say it's 5,000 pages and it costs, I'll just put it in here. So if it's, you get 5,000 pages and then you have, so it would be 5,000, and if there's 10 per page, so then you're getting 50,000 labels, and let's say that costs $200. So if you're going to have the printed labels, you would just figure out how much it costs for the labels themselves. So that if it's like, let's say it costs $10 and it's hypothetically one page with 10 labels, then it'd be $1 per page or per label. Obviously it'd be a lot less than that, but just simple math. And then for ink, you would just calculate how much the cartridge costs and how many pages it prints, and that will determine how much it costs per label. So generally the printable ones will be much less than 5 cents per label, but it's not as high quality of a label. It's not really retail ready, but I know a lot of growers are using the paper labels. So that's the only modification you would need to do to change that. And then the cost per clamshell. So again, this is a retail price. If you're growing commercially, you should be able to get a much better price per clamshell. I think as of the spring, we were paying like somewhere between 35 to 40 cents per clamshell, depending on the clamshell itself. So if you're buying in bulk or from a wholesaler, you should be able to get better pricing than this. But again, I just wanted to show what it would be just buying it online. So it would be 56 cents for the label and the clamshell. Super simple. Now, this is the most important page, which is the total cost per tray and clamshell sold. So a few other things you're going to need to know to do this is, one, what is your yield per tray for each crop? Which in theory, you should have that data. If not, super easy, just like harvest 10 trays of, let's say, pea shoots, and then weigh the total and divide it by 10, and that gives you the average yield per tray. And you want to do that more often so that you have like the most accurate number, but that'll just give you a quick, simple number to throw in here. And so for pea shoots, this is, I think, pretty reasonable. I've been able to get much higher than this, but let's just say it's 70 or 50 grams. You're selling it in a 100 gram clamshell. That means you're going to get 7.5 clamshells per tray. So you can see the number here, which is the total cost per tray, is adding up all the soil, seed, electricity, labor, and clamshell costs for, without the clamshell cost there. So it's just the labor, seed, electricity, and soil cost calculator adds up to this number here. And that is the cost to produce that tray of microgreens without packaging it. Including labor, but without the actual packaging itself, which is the So this number is the cost of the soil, the seed and electricity, and the labor. So as you can see, it's a pretty big number. It might be intimidating because you're thinking, oh, like $6.31. But most people calculate without labor. And when you calculate without labor, one, yes, your numbers will be higher, but they're not going to be accurate because at some point, you're probably not going to want to do all the seeding, all the soil mixing, all the harvesting, all the delivering. So you really want to assume that you are not doing the labor in these calculations. I think that's really, really important. If you're assuming you're doing the labor, then these numbers will obviously be higher because your labor costs, you're not paying yourself necessarily, so it's going to show higher numbers. But I think it's really important from a business perspective to calculate it assuming you are not doing the labor. So you want to have the total labor, including what you're doing at the market rate or wage that it would cost you in your local area to get someone to do that work. And then this is the total cost per clamshell, which is going to be this number divided by 7.5, because that's how many clamshells you get per tray, plus the cost of the clamshell and the label. So per clamshell that you sell, it's going to cost you $1.40 to produce. Now, generally speaking, I think this number is starting to get a bit conservative now because prices have really started to increase. I've seen in some areas on the microgreens front, but let's just say $6 is the price that you're going to be selling this clamshell for. Then you are going to have a net profit of $4.60 per clamshell. And if you're selling 7.5 clamshells per tray because you're getting 7.5 of them per tray, then your revenue would be $45 per tray. And your net profit would be $38.69 per tray. And then the net profit margin, which is just the net profit divided by the revenue, is pretty much 86%, which is extremely high. Consider you're talking about labor is included in this. So as you can see, pea shoots are without a doubt a very profitable crop to grow. So I definitely always recommend people to grow pea shoots, especially if you have demand for it in your area. You can also use our crop rating system combined with this cost calculator to give you a better sense of what crops to grow, because this will give you the number side, and that will give you the crop rating system will give you the qualitative side. So how much demand is there? What is the ease of growth of that crop? So combining these two is a really, really powerful tool to give you insight, especially for those that are new to growing microgreens and that all this is new and you're not really sure what crops to grow and that sort of thing. Combining these two is like magic. It will make your life so much easier. I wish I had this when I started. It would have helped me dial in what crops I grew a lot sooner. As most growers, I was growing, 20, 30 varieties of microgreens, and then I kind of narrowed it down to pretty much 10 by the last few years of having Living Earth, because that's what I found really were the money makers. So to grow a crop that you can sell a few trays worth, for me personally, not worth it. I'm all about efficiency and getting the most efficient production system. And if you're growing just a few, then for example, your labor costs might be more per unit, because if you're, for example, if you have some sort of automated seeder, which hopefully most of you guys will have later this year, then if you're just doing a couple trays, it's a lot slower to seed than if you're doing like 20 trays at a time seeding, or same thing with harvesting or packaging or things like that. It's just more efficient to do more of something because it lowers the cost per unit. So this is pea shoots. Now we're going to get into broccoli. So it's pretty much the same thing, but we're just going to show you what the difference is in numbers and go through that. All right, so now we're going to go through broccoli, and most of it's pretty much the same. For people that are not used to using spreadsheets, it can appear at first like this is a lot. So I totally get it. So going through a second time just kind of makes it a little bit easier. This time we're going to use the empirical calculator, because I know a lot of you guys are in the US and use gallons and ounces instead of liters and grams. So first thing is you're going to use your Pro Mix. You're going to have the size in gallons. So again, it's 53 gallons uncompressed soil. It's less than that when it's compressed, but what you care about is the usable amount of soil, which is 53 gallons. You put the price of that bale in here, and then this is how much you're going to use per tray. So again, I use 4 liters. So this is just a conversion of that 4 liters to gallons. So it's 1.06 gallons, and costs are going to be the same because the soil for pea shoots, for broccoli, your soil really should be the same. So this should be the same for all the crops that you are growing. Now, if you're using Gaia Green, if we're doing a 22-pound bag, that is 352 ounces. If it costs, let's say, $55, then you would get 16 cents per ounce of fertilizer. So that gives you 1.31 ounces of fertilizer per tray, which is 20 cents. So that gives you a total of $1.10. And then if you decide to use vermiculite, again, I highly recommend using vermiculite. I think it's, just so helpful. It's well worth, in my opinion, the 18 cents per tray here. So ideally, you want to buy this in 30 gallons, but just my quick calculation got me to 29.89. But I believe it's 30 gallons or 113 liters, and that generally will cost you somewhere around $40. And so the cost per gallon is $1.34 using half a liter. So that's almost an eighth of a gallon, roughly. So you'll be using 0.13 gallons for if you're using a top coat, roughly, and that'll cost you 18 cents. So that gets your soil to $1.28 per tray. Next, now this one's going to be different because your seed is different, and potentially, depending on how you're growing your crop, the electricity cost might be different as well. So for broccoli, generally, like the biggest size you can usually get is 25 pound. But if you're using a smaller bag and you want to get a more accurate measurement of how much it costs for at that smaller bag size, you can just switch this out. So if you're using a 25-pound bag and it costs $260, that would equate to 65 cents per ounce. Let's say you're using 15 grams of seed, then it would be 0.53 ounces per tray, and that will cost you 34 cents per tray. Much lower than the pea shoots. I think the pea shoots were like $1.60. So just something to keep in mind, that the cost of the seed is not always indicative of the profitability of the crop, because I think people sometimes see, oh, it's a really expensive seed, or you need a lot of seed and it could be more expensive. And then you think, oh, it's going to be less profitable. But as we'll see at the end of this, that pea shoots are definitely more profitable than broccoli, and the seed costs like 5 times as much or something like that. Now, the electricity cost calculator, this is pretty much the same. So it's also on a 10-day crop cycle. So all you got to do is update that number. It'll automatically tell you how much it costs per tray, which is really nice. So again, this document is really great to keep track over time because electricity prices change. soil costs change, seed costs change, labor costs change too. So you can update that super easily on this document and keep track of the different costs and how they're affecting your profitability. And you would put your cost of electricity in here, the number of grow lights using, and the watts per grow light, and it will automatically calculate your electricity costs. Next is labor. I just left everything the same. So again, there's two methods. You can either calculate the total labor that it's taking you, total hours that's taking you in a week, and how many trays you're growing that week, and that'll give you a pretty fair indication. But I always recommend kind of diving a bit deeper and individualizing each component, and that will give you a much more accurate picture of where you can improve on your labor costs. And because it's such a big component of the cost of growing microgreens, I definitely recommend doing it this way because it'll just make it a lot easier to figure out where you can improve your production system. So I'm not going to go through all this again, but depending on what your labor rate is in your local area, you can change that per hour and then how long it takes you to do it. And I just put these numbers in, so don't assume that these are the most accurate. I think this is a fair estimate, but if it's on average 0.75 minutes, then definitely put in 0.75. And again, you definitely want to have the most accurate numbers here. So if you're doing it yourself, add a buffer. If your staff is doing these for you, then definitely use the numbers that are there because those will be the most accurate. So next we have the label and clamshell cost calculator. So again, this is super simple, really simple. How many labels you're getting per case, and then how much that case costs gives you the cost per clamshell. If you're using ink, then you would account for that pretty much by dividing how many pages that cartridge of ink can print by the cost. And then cost per clamshell is the same thing here. It's how many clamshells come in a case divided by that cost of the case gives you the cost per clamshell. And then this total is the number that it costs you to package your product. And then lastly, which is of course the most important page here, is the production cost per tray and clamshell sold. So again, we're growing broccoli here, so the yield's going to be different, much lower. I put in 200 grams, and then if you're getting 60 grams per clamshell, which is generally what I recommend for broccoli to keep the margins still pretty good. So that means you're getting 3.33 clamshells per tray. Now, if you're selling broccoli at $6 per clamshell, then you're going to have a net profit per clamshell of $3.92 because it costs $2.08 per clamshell to grow. So this is the cost of the clamshell, the label, the labor, the seed electricity, and the soil. So it costs you $2.06 per clamshell to grow, and you're selling it for $6. Therefore, you get $3.92 of profit per clamshell. Now, per tray, you're going to get a revenue of $20 per tray. And that compares to pea shoots of $45. So you can see right off the bat, big difference between one crop to the next. And as you put more crops that you're growing in this, you might be surprised to find that you're not making as much, or you're making more than you expected on certain crops. And it's important as much as you can to focus on the crops that are producing more profit for you and more revenue, because the more of that you have, the faster you can put that profit either for the life you want to live, or you can use that profit to build your business and hire staff and make your life easier and have a better lifestyle as a farmer. So that's why I think this is so important. It really can help you make these really important big decisions on what crops to grow and what to focus on in sales as well. Because if you have a customer that wants, let's say shiso, and let's say hypothetically shiso has a net profit per clamshell of like $1 versus broccoli of $4, then it's okay, you have to grow 4 times as much shiso to have the same amount of profit as one tray of broccoli, just as an example. Now, I don't think that, I'm not saying that's an accurate number, just hypothetical here. So that just really, really helps you determine where you should be focusing your energy. And then that means that you'll be profitable and more profitable sooner, and you can make advances in your business a lot sooner this way. So this document's really, really important. Now here, the net profit margin for broccoli is still pretty high at pretty much 75%. But let's just say hypothetically your prices are $5, then you're getting a 70% margin. If let's say you're selling at wholesale and you're selling at $4, you're getting a 62% 20% margin. So this helps you see how much you're making per product, right? So I think that the percentage is important, but I think the number here, the net profit per clamshell, if I were to use one number as the primary determining factor in from a profitability perspective, it would probably be net profit per clamshell, because as you can see, 62% doesn't seem that bad. 75% is obviously better, but then if you're selling it for $4 and you're making $2 per clamshell, and this would be a wholesale scenario, and if it's $6, you're making double, you're making $3.92. So it really can make a big difference. So this calculator will really help you dial in these numbers. Feel free to play with this calculator. See like, okay, if I sell pea shoots at a wholesale price of $4 per clamshell, can I approach retail stores or wholesale distributors and maybe just sell that one product because it's so profitable, as an example. So it really allows you to play with your business from a numbers perspective, which I think is really important as a business owner and a farmer, to be able to accurately go through all this and get a accurate picture of where your business is at today, how to improve it, and what to focus on moving forward. So this document is an absolute gold mine for those of you that are struggling with the cost side of things. This will just make your life so much easier. So I hope this helps you all. And again, if you want to download this, it's only going to be available for free for a very limited time. So definitely, if you're listening to this, go to microgreensconsulting.com and download this guide while it's still free. Thank you all so much for joining the podcast today, and look forward to seeing the next one. Thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. To access a wealth of insights, just click the subscribe button, stay notified about each new episode, and enjoy all of this wisdom for free. If you're ready to supercharge your microgreens business, visit microgreensconsulting.com for a gold mine of guides and resources. We've transformed thousands of microgreens businesses, and you're invited to join the success story. Let's stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Microgreens Consulting for exclusive content and expert tips and wisdom. If you found this episode insightful, please leave us a review, spread the word, and let's share microgreens magic with the world. Until next time, let curiosity fuel your growth, and may happiness be your harvest. Happy growing, everyone.